Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora Cecere.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Lora Cecere, and I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights. And this podcast is part of the ongoing series of What Would I Tell My 25-Year-Old Self? And these interviews, I handpick supply chain leaders that I admire, and I ask them to go back and think about when they were 25, where they were at, what they would have told themselves. And this is part of the series to be able to help young professionals and even seasoned professionals to think about what matters in life and in their career and in their legacy. Today, I'm going to interview Matt Spooner, and I have known Matt for about 5 years now, and I'm impressed with Matt's understanding of the industry. And Matt, tell the group a little bit about yourself, and then let's get started.
Thanks, Laura. So, I've worked in supply chain and predominantly supply chain planning for around 30 years. And I've had a bit of a mixed career between sort of thought leadership and industry. So a lot of my time at leading supply chains at companies like Ericsson, ABB, and currently at Hitachi Energy. But I've also spent some of my career in Gartner and also in the software industry, in the supply chain planning software industry at Kinaxis. So I've seen supply chain from most sides.
Yeah, you're one of the few people that I know that have been an analyst, worked for a technology company, and also worked for a manufacturer. And many of our processes are better suited for process companies than discrete companies. So I always admire your insight there. So Matt, take us back. You're 25. Tell us about Matt Spooner at 25. Where were you and what was your head all about?
At 25, I was just going back. I was just coming into my first job in supply chain. So I studied my degree and accidentally fell into supply chain because I studied computer science and worked in the same office as a consultancy, supply chain consultancy, and their analyst was on vacation, and as the only person who knew anything about using Excel, I was co-opted to come and create some Excel models for an urgent client engagement that they had. And that was a small consultancy called LCP, and they sponsored me through the rest of my degree. I ended up studying and writing a thesis on the bullwhip effect, and I fell in love with the supply chain. So at 25, I was just leaving university. I had got a job at one of LCP's clients, a company called Madge Networks, who was the youngest company in Europe ever to reach $1 billion valuation. It was a technology company, and it was growing extremely fast and for a couple of years was a fantastic place to work because it was a young team and we were inventing everything.
So what would you have told that 25-year-old Matt?
So the first thing that I would have told that 25-year-old Matt was, look, you've accidentally fallen into probably the best career. And the reason is that supply chain is a combination of analytics and being very highly analytical, but also having great people skills and talking to people and understanding different cultures. It's a profession which touches everything. So throughout my career, I've worked in with people from finance, from sales and marketing, from R&D, engineering, communications. You work with everyone in supply chain, and I don't think there's another role that actually gives you that breadth of insight into the way that an organization works. So the first thing is you've fallen into the best possible career now. Make the most of it for the next 30 years or so.
So Matt, as you made the best of it for the next 30 years or so, what have you focused on in terms of Matt building skills or Matt building interpersonal capabilities? Where have you focused on hard work on yourself?
Yeah, and well, I think that I was my my underlying personality, I think, is very analytical and maybe sort of slightly technology driven. And as I've become more experienced, I've really focused on the people skills and the networking, and the amount of the amount of time that I spend networking. And now I love networking. I'm networking almost every single day. I'm engaging in conversations on LinkedIn. I attend lots of networking forums, and I wish that I'd spent a lot more of my time right at the beginning of my career, building up those networking skills, because that's something that I've really fallen in love with. The the other side, which I think I was extremely lucky to have fallen into, and developed, is this career where I've not just been an operational leader, but I've been an operational leader and a thought leader. And I like doing both those type of roles. I think when you're involved in operations and leading a supply chain or leading a planning team, it's very, very difficult to actually think about the future and to think about oh, am I doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing as an organization? You're focused on fighting fires. But so it's really nice to spend these periods of thought leadership. But then I don't see myself as ever being a career thought leader, because I actually want to go back in to operations and actually start operationalizing a lot of the things that I've been learning. So I think that that I think has really suited my personality extremely well, is actually trying to balance this, on the fringe of thought leadership and operate and focusing on operations and getting things done.
Well, you can be a thought leader in operations as well, right?
Yeah, and that's what I certainly hope to do in my current role, is to maintain that thought leadership and not just get tied into the daily grind of of operations.
So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, I'd like to be better at networking, how do you effectively network, Matt? Because I think this is something that you've really worked on.
Yeah, there's I think a couple of aspects of being really successful on networking. The social tools, particularly things like LinkedIn, I think have really changed the game in terms of networking. Just the amount that you can, the reach that you can get. But I have to say there is an enormous pile of rubbish on LinkedIn. But that's a great opportunity for a networker, because the good content actually really stands out. and and I think that refining, and as somebody who's just coming in, so starting their career, don't be afraid to be a little bit controversial in putting content out on LinkedIn. But make sure that whatever you do, don't just get AI to write the content for you. By all means, use AI to refine it, but write your own content. Make sure that it's interesting, that somebody who's going to read this, is going to be interested in it, and try and solicit a bit of debate on that content. And I think so. LinkedIn, I think, is a great networking opportunity. But then I think there's still a great place for face-to-face networking. I live in Switzerland, which is a country where networking is actually such an important part of the business culture. And there are so many different networking groups. There's pharmaceutical networking group locally that I go to every month that has a monthly meeting. It's not supply chain, but you get people from every part of pharma there. You've got CSCMP have a networking group every month. You have Swiss Supply Chain have a networking meeting every month, and I actually try to go to a lot of these networking meetings and go and meet people. And the other side, I think, on networking is try and take the opportunity to sit on a panel or present and talk and because then you get known and then people go and approach you. It's a very much a great icebreaker about networking, but it's networking is important. And the other thing, actually, as I think about it, networking in the organization where you're working it's actually increasingly important because since COVID, since so many people have been working from home, the office has become a lot quieter than it was in the past. And so you don't have so many opportunities for informal conversations. You've actually got to go to the coffee machine in different parts of the building and actively approach people that you don't know, and you do much more active networking in your organization, and get to understand other people's roles.
You know, we used to have a water cooler in offices, right? Or a kitchen where people would get coffee, and it was a great place to network. You got to create that virtual water cooler now, right? And I find that most people don't think about networking as part of their day-to-day activities, but just reaching out to somebody that you care about and saying, how you doing, and making time to pick up the phone and talk to them. And I think it's important that it's two-way, that you're not just always asking for a favor, that, if, it's a two-way street.
That's actually a really good point. It's networking has always got to be two-way. It's not just about asking for a favor. And I think you're right. It's also having those very informal, just asking people how they are, a little bit about their family, but also when you speak to somebody, asking them, but then offering something back to them in exchange, and it becomes
Right.
I think that there's a skill, and I think you should start that skill at an early age, because I think that's probably where the promotions are going to come from. Is if
Right.
you become, you have to be competent at your job, but you've also got to be known, and the way that you can become known either externally or internally in the organization is networking. And
Right.
the other really important element to this is that the job market has changed so much. It used to be, recruiters would have jobs and you would go and apply for a job. But I think that like probably 80% of jobs are now on the hidden job market. It's your next role. There's a 80% chance that your next role will come from somebody in your network. And the wider your network is, the more opportunity you're going to get a great next role.
And I think so many people don't appreciate their networking opportunities, whether you're young and you're a caddy on a golf course, find out about the people that you're carrying the clubs for, or if you're waitressing, if you get the opportunity, find out about people, or, if you're sitting on an airplane, right, the conversations that you can have, or, the offices, but, genuinely care and actively listen and make networking a skill. I think that's great feedback. Okay, Matt, have you had an experience in your career where you've stumbled or failed, and how did you pick yourself up?
Maybe I've been sort of, I have a very optimistic view on life, and I don't look back at, nothing as really terrible has happened in the work environment. I've never had a really terrible boss. I've never had a job that, I really didn't like. And maybe it's because I just get on and like the jobs that I do. And I don't look back and think, oh, I wish I'd done this differently, because I think, I've learned from everything, every job that I've done. But if I probably my most recent experience, I think if I'm really reflecting on this, is that I spent my I don't think I ever had to write a job application. From being at university, I fell into supply chain from sharing an office. I then went and joined a client of the consultancy. It's Gartner approached me at a conference. It's and recently or last year, I due to the changes, I laid off for the first time in my career at the sort of in my early 50s, and it's I thought that I had a lot to offer, and having to go through that process of looking for a role was probably, I wouldn't say I stumbled, but what I it was that was a wake up call for me.
Yeah.
And I took the combination of looking for a new role and developing my thought leadership and really, really developing my network was actually a full-time job. I was working, 10 hours a day. I wasn't, during that period, I wasn't, being idle. And I think that's a really, really important, consideration. And I know that this is happening to a lot of people, and a lot of people I think are finding new roles. But I think and if I'm looking back and talking to my 25-year-old self and saying, so what should you do? I would say, don't take things for granted. Keep your skills really sharp, and make sure that you're up to date, because you never know what's going to be around the corner.
Well, and I think the other thing that helped you to make it through that period was you focused on your networking skills. And what else did you learn about Matt in that period where you had to apply for a job and, go out to the market?
What I think it really made me think about what it was that I wanted to do next. So I think I'd had uh, okay, maybe not a stellar career trajectory, but I'd had a pretty good career trajectory. It had gone, every stage I'd got more and more levels of seniority, and ended up leading a global planning team at a multi-billion-dollar industrial organization. And on reflection, what I realized is that I wanted to take a slightly lower level in the organization, not maybe just one level down, but at a level where, firstly, I could make a real difference from a technical perspective, as opposed to managing the politics of a large organization and managing budgets and all of those things that come with seniority. That what I really liked was the technical side. And I thought back to my time in Ericsson, where I ran a pretty good S&OP process, and I think it really delivered value to the organization, which I've subsequently discovered very few organizations actually get to that point where their S&OP process can really be defined as a value creating process. But I thought, well, I can actually still do better than that. So I would like to go back on into a role where I'm really focused on that S&OP, because that's something that I know that I can make a real difference. And so it's actually about saying, where do I want to go to on my next career move? And that's what I think I learned most, is about going back to something that I really, really would enjoy doing, and probably the realization that just chasing a more and more senior position wasn't what I wanted to do.
So be conscious about choice of what you want to do and where your skills at. Okay, Matt, let's wrap up. What did I not ask you that you want to tell that young 25-year-old Matt?
So, yeah, and I guess the one thing you didn't ask me about is maybe it's less relevant today, but it's around the choices around sort of work-life balance and
Mm-hmm.
about the and at the time where I came into into business, there was this view that you work extremely hard. I would say that I would in my late 20s, 30s, I would definitely be a workaholic. I probably took like 1 day off or 2 days off after my kids were born, and I think my my wife reminds me that I wasn't as present as I should have been at those times. And then when I became more senior, I took a slight step back. So I wouldn't say that, and I think I worked a lot more smartly and actually focused a lot more on doing things for my own building myself, my own personal life and outside work. But I did that with the same focus as I did with that I use for working as well. And what I found was actually the things that I was doing in my personal life and sporting life were actually helping me to become better as a leader as well. And I think I wish that I probably spent more time when I was younger in my 30s. I don't think it would have harmed my career, but that was just the way that everyone did it at that time. And maybe, and people talk about Gen Z and about how they're maybe not as focused. Well, I don't know. I look at that and think, well, I wish I was like that. And maybe when people criticize the you know Gen Z and the millennials, they probably actually, maybe it's because we all look back and said, I wish I was a bit like that when I was younger.
Well, I think one of the things that I admire about you, Matt, is the fact that you've really focused on health and, wellness and, physical activity, and you've kept that in balance. You're a young 50-year-old, right? And, you're working, biking and, staying fit, right? I think that what would you give as advice to the 25-year-old Matt about work-life balance around health and work and family?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's you don't need to do a massive amount of fitness work to actually stay fit and healthy. I mean, probably 4 hours per week, 4 or 5 hours per week of of fitness, and I think that most people, by not wasting so much time, can afford to carve out 4 or 5 hours. And I wouldn't take that away from family time. I think I would take that away from maybe a bit of work time, maybe being a bit smarter, a bit more efficient. But I think that it's people really should make sure that they're doing the minimum level that they need to make a real difference, and that, say, the minimum level is not a massive amount.
Well, Matt, I look forward to hearing about the leadership in your new job and maybe having you back to our podcast. And thank you for joining us today to talk about what I would tell my 25-year-old self. All the best.
Thanks, Laura. That's been really interesting.